He grabbed her waist firmly, pulling her close to himself. "Don't resist me. This is a way of releasing God's blessing over your life, Daddy," Possibility said to Deborah during a special prayer. "I've always believed in praying to God myself, but my mother thought differently. To her, Pastor Benjamin aka Daddy Possibilities was the voice of God on earth. She trusted him completely, dragging me to his church for prayers and prophecies. When I told her I wanted to pray on my own, she called me stubborn and insisted I meet him for a special prayer. I didn't want to, but I obeyed her. That day, everything changed. This is a story of many young girls. House of Eternal Possibilities Church of God stood tall. It wasn't just a place of worship, it was a landmark. Crowds filled the pews every Sunday, eager to catch a glimpse of Daddy Possibilities, Pastor Benjamin Adetola. He was no ordinary preacher. With his designer suits, polished shoes, and a convoy of luxury cars, he was as much a celebrity as a man of God. Women adored him, calling him Daddy with reverence. They whispered about his anointing, giving him more respect than they gave their husbands. Men, too, bowed to him, seeking his guidance for their businesses and families. Pastor Benjamin had a reputation for solving problems, especially for those who could pay the price. The church auditorium buzzed with excitement as the choir belted out powerful tunes. Daddy Possibilities walked in, his presence commanding attention. He mounted the altar, gripping the microphone tightly. "Today," he announced, "God is about to do something miraculous. Your lives will never remain the same." The congregation erupted in cheers. The congregation at House of Eternal Possibilities was as lively as ever. The choir had just finished their electrifying ministration when Mrs. Richel approached Daddy Possibilities after the service. Her 14-year-old teenage daughter, Deborah, stood by her side, clutching her handbag nervously. "Daddy, please, I need you to pray for my daughter," Mrs. Rachel began. "She has just finished her wake and is trusting God for admission into the university." Possibility smiled warmly, his charismatic demeanor drawing them in. "Ah, my daughter," he said, turning to Deborah. "God has great plans for you. Come forward." Deborah stepped forward hesitantly. Daddy Possibilities placed his hand on her head, muttering a string of prayers. After the prayer, Daddy Possibilities straightened up and spoke directly to Deborah. "Come back later, my daughter. There's a special prayer I need to do for your breakthrough. God is about to open doors for you." Mrs. Rachel beamed with gratitude. "Thank you, Daddy. We will be here." That evening, at home, Deborah sat quietly in the corner of the living room while her mother prepared dinner. The events of the day weighed heavily on her mind. "Mummy," she began hesitantly, "I don't think I need to go back to Daddy Possibilities for the prayer. I want to pray on my own. God will still hear me." Mrs. Rachel stopped chopping vegetables and turned to face her daughter, her expression stern. "What nonsense are you saying, Deborah? Do you think you know God better than Daddy Possibilities? He's a man of God. His prayers work faster and more efficiently." "But, Mum," Deborah tried to explain, "I believe God will hear me if I pray sincerely from my heart." Mrs. Rachel waved her hand dismissively. "You're just being stubborn. You teenagers think you know everything. Tomorrow, you will go back to Daddy Possibilities for the prayer, and that's final." Deborah sighed, knowing there was no point arguing further. She quietly returned to her room, her heart heavy with unease. The next day, Deborah returned to the church as instructed by her mother. She was greeted by one of the ushers, who led her to Daddy Possibilities' office. "Ah, my daughter, welcome," Daddy Possibilities said, rising from his plush chair. His smile was wide, but there was something unsettling in his gaze that Deborah couldn't quite place. "Sit down," he said, motioning to the chair opposite him. Deborah sat nervously, clutching her bag tightly. "God revealed something to me about you," Daddy Possibilities began. Your destiny is very bright, but there are forces trying to stop you. That's why I need to pray for you in a special way." Deborah nodded, unsure of what to say. "Come closer," he instructed. Hesitantly, Deborah stood and moved closer to his desk. What happened next would change her life forever. Daddy Possibility's demeanor shifted. His voice, once soothing, became demanding. He reached for her, and before Deborah could fully comprehend what was happening, he had his way with her. When it was over, he adjusted his tie, his expression calm as though nothing had happened. Deborah, on the other hand, was shaking, tears streaming down her face. "Listen to me," Daddy Possibilities said firmly. "You must never tell anyone about this. If you do, you will bring a curse upon yourself and your family. Do you understand?" Deborah nodded numbly, her voice caught in her throat. She stumbled out of the office, her mind spinning. When Deborah returned home, she was a shadow of herself. Her mother noticed her silence, but dismissed it as teenage moodiness. "Deborah, how was the prayer session?" Mrs. Rachel asked casually, while peeling yams. Deborah hesitated, her lips trembling. "Mama, something happened." Mrs. Rachel glanced at her daughter briefly. "What happened? Speak up." Deborah tried to find the words. "Mama, I don't think Daddy Possibilities is what he seems." Before she could finish, Mrs. Rachel slammed her knife on the cutting board. Deborah, what are you trying to say? That a whole man of God is not genuine? Are you trying to bring a curse upon this house?" "Mama, please, just listen to me," Deborah pleaded. He did something to me." "Keep quiet," her mother shouted, her voice laced with anger. "I don't want to hear any more of this nonsense. You just don't like church, that's why you're saying all these things. You're too young to understand spiritual matters. Go to your room and stop nagging me." Deborah's heart sank. She wanted to scream, to cry, to make her mother see the truth. But Mrs. Rachel had already dismissed her, focusing again on her cooking. During the service the next Sunday, Pastor Benjamin's prophetic powers were on full display. He scanned the crowd as though searching for someone. Suddenly, his eyes settled on a young woman sitting quietly in the middle row. "You, the sister in the yellow dress, stand up." The woman, visibly nervous, rose to her feet. "Yes, Daddy." "What's your name?" "My name is Taupe, sir," she replied, her voice trembling. "Taupe, Daddy," Possibilities began. "The Lord is showing me something about your life. You've been struggling with relationships. Am I correct?" Taupe's eyes widened in shock. "Yes, Daddy, it's true. You've been praying for a husband, but nothing is working. Am I speaking the truth?" "Yes, Danny, it's true." Taupe's voice cracked as tears streamed down her face. Taupe walked to the altar, where Daddy Possibilities laid his hand on her head. "I break every yoke of delay in your life. Your husband will find you. After this service, come and see me in my office. There is a special prayer I need to do for you." The congregation erupted in applause as Taupe knelt down, overwhelmed. Later in the service, Daddy Possibilities turned his attention to a sophisticated-looking woman seated at the front. She was Mrs. Adiola, the wife of a successful businessman. She was known for her wealth, always dressed in the finest attire. "You, my daughter, Mrs. Adiola, stand up." She rose gracefully, a curious smile on her face. "Yes, Daddy. The Lord is revealing something to me about your marriage," Daddy Possibilities said, his tone grave. "There is trouble in your home. Your husband has not been faithful." Mrs. Adelona's expression shifted, her smile fading. "Daddy, is that true?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes, my daughter," Daddy Possibilities replied. "But don't worry, God will fight for you. After the service, come to my office for counseling." "Oh." The congregation murmured, impressed by Daddy's possibilities' ability to see what others could not. After the service, a line of people formed outside Daddy Possibility's lavish office. The room was decorated with gold-plated furniture and framed photographs of him with dignitaries. Taupe was the first to be called in. She sat nervously across from him, clutching her handbag. "My daughter," Daddy Possibilities began. "You are special. That is why the enemy has been fighting your relationships. But don't worry, I will personally pray for you. Sow a seed of faith, and your breakthrough will come." "Thank you, Daddy," Taupe said, reaching into her bag to hand over an envelope of cash. Next, Mrs. Adiola entered. Daddy Possibilities welcomed her warmly. "My daughter, the enemy wants to destroy your home, but with prayer, we will overcome." "Thank you, Daddy," she said, tears in her eyes. Before she left, Daddy Possibilities handed her a bottle of anointed oil. "Use this to anoint your house. And remember, continue to support the work of God with your resources." On Sundays, Daddy Possibilities always ended his sermons with a message about wealth and success. "God wants his children to prosper," he declared from the altar. "Look at me. I am a living testimony. Sow into this ministry, and you too will prosper." The congregation cheered, many rushing to the altar to drop money at his feet. What the congregation didn't know was that Daddy Possibilities was no longer the humble pastor he once was. His focus had shifted from saving souls to building his empire. Women flocked to him, and he enjoyed the power he held over their lives. Weeks turned into months, and Deborah found herself trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. Each time she was summoned to Daddy Possibilities' office, her fear grew, but she felt powerless to stop it. At home, she tried several times to speak to her mother, but Mrs. Rachel's unwavering faith in Daddy Possibilities made it impossible. "Deborah," her mother would say, "if you don't want God's blessings, just say so. Stop talking nonsense about a man of God." Deborah stopped trying. She buried her pain deep inside, her once bright eyes now dull with sadness. One Sunday, after yet another encounter with Daddy Possibilities, Deborah returned home and locked herself in her room. She stared at the mirror, barely recognizing the person looking back at her. She sat down and began to write in her journal, pouring out her feelings in words she couldn't say aloud. Another Sunday at House of Eternal Possibilities was filled with energy as usual. The choir sang with passion, the congregation clapped and danced, and Daddy Possibilities stood tall on the altar, delivering a sermon about divine favor. His words captivated the crowd, and after the service, a line of people formed outside his office, seeking special prayers and counsel. Among them was Mrs. James, a respected member of the church, accompanied by her daughter Fayin. Fayin was a bright, ambitious 16-year-old girl, preparing to travel abroad for her studies. She had been processing her visa for weeks, and Mrs. James believed that Daddy Possibilities' prayers would ensure everything went smoothly. "Daddy, please pray for my daughter," Mrs. James said as they entered his office. "She's been working hard for her visa, and we want God to make the process seamless." Daddy Possibilities nodded, his face radiating a practiced smile. "Ah, my daughter Fien, God has great plans for you. Let us pray." He placed his hand on Fien her head and began to pray fervently, invoking blessings and favor. Mrs. James, moved by the prayer, knelt beside her daughter, tears in her eyes. When the prayer ended, Daddy Possibilities turned to Fien. "My daughter, there is something more we need to address. God revealed to me that there are forces trying to block your success. Come back later in the week for a special prayer, and we will deal with it." Mrs. James nodded eagerly. "Thank you, Daddy. We'll be here." True to her mother's instructions, Fien returned to the church a few days later. She was nervous, but told herself it was just another prayer session. One of the ushers led her into Daddy Possibility's office. "Ah, my daughter, welcome," he greeted, his voice warm and inviting. "Are you ready for your breakthrough?" "Yes, sir," Fionn replied, forcing a smile. "Good. Sit down," he instructed, motioning to the chair across from him. Fionn sat down, clutching her bag tightly. Daddy Possibilities began speaking in a low tone, telling her about the spiritual battles she was facing and how his prayers would ensure her visa process was successful. "Stand up," he said suddenly. Fionn stood, confused but obedient. He approached her and placed his hands on her shoulders, muttering a prayer. Then, without warning, his demeanor changed. He reached for her waist, holding it closer to himself, his intentions now clear. "Daddy, what are you doing?" Fionn asked, trying to pull away. "Shh," he whispered, tightening his grip. "This is for your breakthrough. Don't resist God's work." Before Fionn could protest further, he had his way with her. When it was over, she sat in shock, tears streaming down her face. "Listen to me," Daddy Possibilities said, adjusting his tie. "You must never tell anyone about this. I have just released blessings upon your life, and trust me, your visa application is going to be a success if you do as I say, but if you don't, you will bring a curse upon yourself and your family. Do you understand?" Fionn nodded numbly, unable to speak. Just as she was dressing up, the door to the office swung open. Standing in the doorway was Mrs. Adetola, Daddy Possibility's wife. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. The dishevelled look on Fionn's face and the guilt written all over her husband's. "Benjamin, what is going on here?" she demanded, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "My darling, it's not what it looks like," Daddy Possibility stammered, his confident demeanour replaced by panic. "Not what it looks like?" she repeated, her voice rising. "I just walked in on you with a young girl. In the house of God." Fionn, still shaking, tried to slip past Mrs. Adetola, but the older woman stopped her. "Wait, my dear. Are you okay? What happened?" Before Fionn could respond, Daddy Possibilities stepped in. "Adoni, please, let her go. I'll explain everything." Mrs. Adetola hesitated, her face a mix of confusion and anger. Finally, she stepped aside, and Fionn rushed out of the office. As soon as the door closed, Mrs. Adetola turned to her husband. "What have you done, Benjamin? Do you realize the damage this could cause? The shame it would bring to this church, to our family?" Daddy Possibilities sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. "It was the devil, Aduni. I don't know what came over me. Please, you must forgive me. And you must never speak of this to anyone." Mrs. Adetola's eyes filled with tears. "You expect me to stay quiet after what I just saw? This is a disgrace." "Adoni, please," he begged, reaching for her hand. "If this gets out, it will destroy everything we've built. Think of the church, the congregation. They need me." Mrs. Adetola pulled her hand away, her face etched with disappointment. "Benjamin, this is not the man I married. I don't even recognize you anymore." "It was a mistake," he insisted. "I will pray for forgiveness, and I know God will forgive me, but you must help me keep this a secret. Please." After a long pause, Mrs. Adetola nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but this can never happen again. If I find out you've done this to another girl, I will not stay silent." "Thank you, Adoni," he said, breathing a sigh of relief. Despite the tension in their home, life at House of Eternal Possibilities continued as usual. Daddy Possibilities preached with the same passion, his voice booming through the microphone as he spoke of prosperity and blessings. The congregation remained unaware of the shadows lurking behind the scenes. Women still flocked to his office for prayers, Men still sought his counsel, and donations continued to pour in. For Yin, however, life was far from normal. She struggled to process what had happened. Her once bright spirit now weighed down by shame and confusion. She avoided her mother's questions, afraid of the consequences if she spoke out. Meanwhile, Mrs. Adetola watched her husband closely, her trust in him shattered. Though she kept his secret, her heart was heavy with guilt and resentment. Daddy Possibilities, on the other hand, seemed unfazed. He told himself that he had been forgiven, that he could continue his ministry as long as he stayed careful, but deep down, he knew that the facade he had built was slowly crumbling. And it was only a matter of time before the truth came to light. The soft hum of the kettle filled the kitchen as Mr. Kunle Adeoye adjusted his tie in the living room mirror. He glanced at his wife, Tola, who was bustling around, getting their 2 children ready for Sunday service at House of Eternal Possibilities. Kunle took a deep breath, hesitating before speaking. "Tola," he said gently, "there's something I've been meaning to talk to you about." Tola paused, brushing lint off their son's trousers. "What is it, Kule?" "I don't know how to explain this," he began, sitting down and loosening his tie. "But lately, I've been feeling disconnected from the church. Deep in my spirit, I don't feel a spiritual connection to House of Eternal Possibilities. Something just doesn't sit right with me." Ola straightened up, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "Disconnected? Colonel, what are you saying? Daddy Possibilities is a true man of God. His prayers have changed lives, even in our family. Remember when he prayed for us about our business? Things turned around almost immediately." Wunle nodded slowly but pressed on. "I understand, Tola, but discernment is important. The Bible says in John 4:01, 'Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they are from God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world.' I feel like we need to test the spirit behind this church. I'm not saying he's a false prophet, but we shouldn't ignore these feelings." Ella sighed, her voice softening. "Kunle, I hear you, but you've always been a bit skeptical. Daddy Possibilities has never given us a reason to doubt him. He's helping so many people. Maybe this is just a phase." Kun leaned back, studying her. "You have so much respect for Daddy Possibilities," he said with a wry smile. "I don't think I've ever heard you speak this highly of me." Tola laughed lightly, waving him off. "Oh, stop it, Kunle. Don't be jealous of a man of God." Kunle chuckled, but remained thoughtful. "I'm serious, Tola. Let's just keep our eyes open, okay? Not everything that glitters is gold." Tola gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder before turning back to the children. "Come on, Kunle, let's not be late for church." The conversation ended there, but the unease in Kunle's heart lingered as they piled into the car and headed to church. The church was packed that morning, as it was every Sunday. People from all walks of life crowded into the building, eager to hear Daddy Possibilities preach and receive their miracles. The choir led a rousing session of praise and worship, their voices filling the room with energy. Daddy Possibilities soon took the stage, his voice booming as he delivered his sermon on divine breakthrough. The congregation hung on his every word, nodding and shouting, "Amen! God is in this place," Daddy Possibilities declared. "Today, he will reveal himself to you in ways you cannot imagine." As the service progressed, Daddy Possibilities began his prophetic session. He moved through the crowd, calling out people by name and revealing intimate details about their lives. "You there," he pointed to a young woman in the crowd. "Your name is Folake, and you've been crying yourself to sleep because of a failed relationship. God says he will restore your joy." The woman gasped, her hands covering her mouth in shock. The congregation erupted in applause, marveling at the accuracy of the prophecy. Next, he turned to an elderly man. "Baba, you've been struggling with chest pain for months. God says you are healed." The man shook his head. The man fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "It's true. It's true." Ckless sat in his seat, watching the display with a mixture of skepticism and discomfort. Tola, on the other hand, was fully engrossed, occasionally nudging Ckless and whispering, "See how God is using him? Isn't it amazing?" Ckless forced a smile but said nothing, the words of 1 John 4:01 echoing in his mind. Meanwhile, in another corner of the church, Deborah sat quietly beside her mother, Mrs. Rachel. Her heart was heavy, and her mind was clouded with despair. Each Sunday was becoming harder for her to endure. She glanced at her mother, who was singing and clapping enthusiastically, completely immersed in the service. Deborah wanted to tell her everything, to finally reveal the horrible secret she had been carrying. But every time she tried, her mother dismissed her, unwilling to hear anything negative about daddy possibilities. Deborah's thoughts drifted to the countless times she had been summoned to his office under the guise of special prayers. The pain, the shame, and the fear still haunted her. She wanted to scream, to cry, to make someone listen. But who would believe her? Her eyes scanned the congregation. Everyone adored Daddy Possibilities. He was untouchable, revered like a saint. She felt trapped, a prisoner in a world where her voice didn't matter. During the prophetic session, Daddy Possibilities called out another woman in the crowd, delivering a detailed prophecy about her troubled marriage. The woman burst into tears, confirming everything he said. The crowd cheered, shouting praises to God for using Daddy Possibilities so powerfully. Deborah felt a pang of anger mixed with despair. How can they not see the truth, she thought bitterly. How can they not see what he really is? As the service continued, Deborah tried to hold back her tears. She bowed her head, silently praying for strength. If no one else would listen, perhaps God would. Back in their seats, Ckless noticed Deborah's demeanor. She looked withdrawn. Her shoulders slumped, and her gaze fixed on the floor. "Tola," he whispered to his wife, "look at that girl over there. She doesn't look okay." Tola followed his gaze and saw Deborah. "Oh, that's Mrs. Rachel's daughter. Maybe she's just shy. What's your point, Ckless?" "I don't know," Ckless admitted. "I just feel like something isn't right." Tola shook her head, dismissing his concerns. "Ckless, you're reading too much into everything. Let's focus on the service." Ckless sighed, leaning back in his seat. The feeling of unease remained, stronger than ever. The service had ended, and the church emptied out as families returned to their homes. At the Adoye household, Ckless and Tola discussed the day's sermon while their children played. Meanwhile, at the Rachel residence, silence hung over the house. Deborah had retreated to her room immediately after they arrived, her heart heavy and her spirit broken. In the dimly lit corner of her room, Deborah sat cross-legged on the floor, clutching a battered diary. It had been her secret companion, the only place she could pour out her anguish. She flipped through its pages, her eyes scanning the words she had written over the months. "I trusted him. Why would God allow this to happen? No one believes me. Even Mama thinks I'm lying. How long will this go on? I can't take it anymore." Tears blurred her vision as she gripped the pen tightly, her hand trembling as she scribbled. "To anyone who finds this, I want you to know the truth. Daddy Possibilities is not who he claims to be. He's hurt me more than I can bear, and I can't live like this anymore." Her sobs filled the quiet room as she closed the diary and set it aside. She reached under her bed and pulled out a small bottle of pills she had taken from her mother's cabinet. With shaky hands, she unscrewed the cap, poured the contents into her palm, and stared at them for a moment. "This is the only way," she whispered to herself, swallowing the pills in one swift motion. She lay back on her bed, clutching the diary to her chest as her tears slowly dried. Within minutes, her breathing grew shallow and her eyes closed. It wasn't until evening that Mrs. Rachel noticed something was amiss. Deborah had not come out of her room for dinner, and the house felt unusually quiet. At first, she assumed her daughter was sulking, as she often did when they argued about church matters. "Deborah," Rachel called, knocking on the door. "Come and eat. You can't stay in there all day." When there was no response, her heart began to race. She pushed the door open and froze at the sight before her. Deborah lay motionless on the bed, her face pale and her hands clutching the diary tightly. The empty pill bottle lay discarded on the floor. "No, no, no, no!" Rachel screamed, rushing to her daughter's side. She shook her, hoping against hope that she would wake up. "Deborah, wake up! Please, baby, wake up!" But Deborah didn't stir. Rachel's hands trembled as she reached for the diary. She opened it and began reading, her eyes widening with each word. Her breath caught in her throat as the full weight of the truth crashed down on her. Daddy says possibilities. The prayers, the office visits, the warnings to stay silent. Her diary, her hands covering her mouth as a guttural cry escaped her. "How could I have been so blind?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My own daughter. I didn't listen. I failed her." Her anguish turned into despair as she stared at the diary on the floor. It contained the damning truth, but what could she do with it? Who would believe her? Daddy Possibilities was revered by everyone, including herself. Not that her possibilities were in no way alarming. "If I tell anyone, they'll say I'm lying," she muttered to herself. "They'll say Deborah hated the church and made all this up. They'll call me a bitter woman trying to destroy a man of God." Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. On one hand, she wanted justice for Deborah. On the other, she feared the backlash and the shame it would bring upon her family. On the third day, she started to see beginnings. Her mother. She clutched Deborah's lifeless body, rocking back and forth as sobs racked her frame. "I'm so sorry, my child. I should have listened. I should have protected you." Rachel made a decision that night. She cleaned up the scene, wiping away any evidence that could link Deborah's death to Daddy Possibilities. She tucked the diary away in a drawer, locking it and hiding the key. When neighbors came the next day to console her, she told them it was an unfortunate accident, that Deborah had been targeted by the evil spirits to take her own life. The church held a small service for Deborah, where Daddy Possibilities offered words of comfort. "The devil works in mysterious ways, but we must remain steadfast in our faith," he said, his voice somber. Rachel stared at him from her seat, her heart filled with rage and sorrow. She wanted to scream the truth to the congregation, to expose the man they all adored, but she remained silent, her grief a heavy burden she would carry. Mrs. Rachel left church with a heavy heart, her hatred for Daddy Possibilities burning inside her. She wanted justice, but feared confronting him directly. Gathering courage, she went to the police station, hoping they would help, but as soon as she mentioned Daddy Possibilities' name, the officer dismissed her, saying the diary wasn't enough evidence. When she left, the officers mocked her, assuming she wanted money. Meanwhile, Fionn's torment continued. Each time Daddy Possibilities called her, fear gripped her. One day she tried to resist, but he threatened her. That night, she locked herself in her room, drowning in despair, but her heart wouldn't stop racing. "Why can't I just forget?" she muttered to herself. Before she could sink deeper into her thoughts, a knock at the door startled her. "Fionn!" her mother's sharp voice called. Fionn reluctantly got up and unlocked the door. Her mother, dressed in a vibrant Ankara wrapper and matching headscarf, stood in the doorway. "Daddy Possibilities has sent for you," her mother said, arms akimbo. "He says there's an urgent prophecy concerning your future. He wants to see you at the church." Fionn's heart sank. The mere mention of Daddy Possibilities sent a wave of nausea through her. She glanced at her bed, hoping to use her discomfort as an excuse. "Mummy, I'm not feeling too well," she said, clutching her stomach for added effect. "I think I need to rest." Her mother's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean, you're not feeling well? When a man of God calls, you don't give excuses. Do you want to block your blessings? Get dressed quickly, we're going." "But Mummy," Fionn looked at her mother. "Should I just tell my mum the kind of man this pastor is?" Her gaze lingered on her mother, who was stood waiting for her to get dressed. She imagined herself speaking up, saying, "Mummy, Daddy Possibilities isn't who you think he is. He's done terrible things to me." But as quickly as the thought came, a flood of doubts drowned it. What if she doesn't believe me? The fear twisted her stomach. Her mother revered Daddy Possibilities. He was a man of God in her eyes, incapable of wrongdoing. Fionn thought back to his chilling words the first time. "If you speak against me, you will bring a curse upon your family. Do you want your mother to suffer for your disobedience?" The memory made her chest tighten. What if he was right? What if her family truly became cursed because of her? She couldn't bear the thought of her mother, who had already sacrificed so much for her, suffering because of her actions. Silently, she vowed to keep the secret buried, even as it slowly consumed her. Resigned, she changed into a simple dress and followed her mother out of the house, her stomach churning with dread. The church was quiet when they arrived, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the compound. Daddy Possibilities' office, however, was well lit, its frosted glass windows glowing faintly. Fiona hesitated as her mother led her to the door. "Go inside," her mother instructed, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I'll be waiting in the main hall. Don't keep the man of God waiting." Fionn swallowed hard and stepped into the office. Daddy Possibilities was seated behind his desk, a serene smile on his face as he gestured for her to come closer. "My dear Fionn," he said warmly, standing to greet her. "It's good to see you again. The Lord has placed something urgent in my spirit concerning you." Fionn nodded, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She avoided his gaze, her discomfort growing with each passing second. "Come," he said, moving around the desk to stand beside her. "Let us pray together. The Lord's message is best received in the spirit of closeness." Fionn stiffened as he placed a hand on her shoulder, the weight of it triggering a rush of memories she had tried so hard to bury. She wanted to run, to scream, but her feet felt rooted to the spot. As Daddy Possibilities began to pray, his tone shifted from solemn to something more intimate. His hand slid down her arm, and the familiar sense of helplessness washed over her. "No," she whispered, her voice barely audible. But he ignored her protest, his actions growing bolder as he pulled her closer. Fionn's body went rigid, her mind screaming for her to fight back, but the fear of what might happen if she resisted kept her frozen. When it was over, Fiona stumbled out of the office, her legs shaky and her chest heavy with shame. As Fionn stepped out of Daddy Possibilities' office, his wife stood in the shadows, watching. Her heart pounded, but she remained silent. She had long known her husband's sins, yet exposing him meant destroying everything, their reputation, their power. She clenched her fists, swallowing her anger. No matter how much it hurt, she chose to protect him, pretending she saw nothing as Fionn walked away. Her mother met her at the entrance, oblivious to the turmoil in her daughter's eyes. "Did the man of God pray for you?" she asked eagerly. "Yes, Mummy," Fionn replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Good. Let's go home." Fionn followed her mother silently, the weight of the day pressing down on her like a dark cloud. Back in her room that evening, Fionn sat on her bed, staring at the blank wall in front of her. The events of the day replayed in her mind like a broken record. She wanted to cry, to scream, to tell someone what had happened, but who would believe her? Her mother thought Daddy Possibilities could do no wrong, and speaking out would only make things worse. Coonley sat up in bed, drenched in sweat, his chest heaving as he struggled to steady his breath. The dream was so vivid it felt real. He could still see Deborah's tear-streaked face, her hands stretched toward him as she cried out for help. Her voice echoed in his mind. "Kunle, please help me. Don't let it happen again." Beside him, Tola stirred, groaning as she turned to face him. "Kunle, what is it again? Why are you waking me up in the middle of the night?" "I saw Deborah," Kunle said, his voice trembling. "She was crying, Tola, crying and begging me for help. I think something's not right. I can feel it in my spirit." Tola sat up and rubbed her eyes, sighing heavily. "Kuna, how many times will I tell you that you're overthinking? Deborah's death was tragic, yes, but you need to stop torturing yourself. These dreams you're having are because of the things you're imagining about Daddy, possibilities." "But what if it's not just my imagination?" Kunle countered, his tone more resolute now. "What if God is trying to show me something? Deborah's death was so sudden and—" He paused, his voice cracking. "And it doesn't sit right with me." "Cool, please, just pray and let it go," Tola said, lying back down. "You're always looking for something that isn't there." But Kunle couldn't let it go. Tola might dismiss his concerns, but the image of Deborah's face haunted him. He made up his mind to investigate, discreetly, without telling anyone. If there was even the slightest chance that something was wrong, he owed it to Deborah's memory to find out the truth. Mrs. Rachel sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the framed picture of Deborah on her bedside table. Her daughter's smile beamed brightly back at her, a cruel reminder of what had been lost. It had been months since Deborah's tragic death, but the pain still clawed at her chest every time she closed her eyes. The house of eternal possibilities was no longer a place of solace for her. It was a constant reminder of the promises Daddy Possibilities had made, promises of deliverance, breakthroughs, and blessings that never came. Instead, she had buried her only daughter, and her heart was burdened with the guilt of not protecting her. The guilt came in waves, each more unbearable than the last. Deborah had confided in her once, mentioning how uncomfortable she felt with Daddy Possibility's attention, but Mrs. Rachel had dismissed it, thinking it was just youthful exaggeration. "The man of God sees something special in you, Deborah," she had said at the time. Now, those words haunted her. Tears streamed down her face as she remembered the last midweek service she attended. Daddy Possibilities had preached about obedience and submission, subtly chastising those who dared to question his authority. She had felt his eyes on her the entire time, as though daring her to speak out. But she couldn't. Her voice had been swallowed by fear, shame, and doubt. That night, sitting alone in her room, she made a decision. She wouldn't return to the house of eternal possibilities. The place that once brought her hope now suffocated her with grief and regret. The following Sunday, Kunle attended church with Tola, going through the motions of the service while his mind worked on a plan. As the congregation dispersed after the closing prayer, Kunle excused himself, telling Tola he needed to have a word with the pastor. Instead of going directly to Daddy Possibility's office, Kunle lingered near the corridor leading to it. He found a quiet spot behind a pillar and waited, keeping an eye on the office door. 2 hours passed, and nothing unusual happened. Several people went in and out, mostly church workers discussing administrative matters. Kunle began to feel foolish. Maybe Tola was right, and he was letting his imagination run wild. Just as he was about to leave, he saw the office door open. His breath caught when he spotted Fiyin rushing out, her face pale and her movements hurried. She clutched her bag tightly to her chest, her eyes darting around nervously as she walked briskly toward the church exit. Kunle's heart raced. Something about her demeanor set off alarm bells in his mind. He decided to follow her, keeping a safe distance so she wouldn't notice. Fiyin left the church compound and walked along the narrow path leading to the main road. She moved quickly, glancing over her shoulder every now and then, as though she feared someone might be following her. When they were far enough from the church, Cunley quickened his pace and called out softly, "Fiyin." Fiyin froze, her shoulders stiffening as she turned around. Her wide, frightened eyes met Cunley's. "Fiyin, please don't be scared," Cunley said gently, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. "I just want to talk to you. I noticed you leaving the pastor's office, and you looked upset. Is everything okay?" Fiyin hesitated, her mind racing. She didn't know who this man was or if she could trust him, but there was something about his concerned expression and soft tone that made her feel he might actually care. Still, she remained guarded. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered, clutching her bag tighter. "Fiyin, I don't mean to pry," Cunner continued, his voice calm and reassuring. "But if something is wrong, you don't have to go through it alone. I want to help you. Please." Fiyin looked away, her throat tightening as tears threatened to fall. She wanted to believe him, to trust that he could be her way out of the nightmare she was living. But what if he didn't believe her? What if he was just like everyone else who blindly worshipped Daddy Possibilities? Seeing her hesitation, Cunley reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card. He extended it to her cautiously. "Who?" he said. "This is my number. You don't have to say anything now if you're not ready, but if you ever feel like talking, please call me. Anytime, day or night." Again, he blinked away tears and tried to smile. Fiyin took the card with trembling hands, her heart pounding. She nodded mutely and turned to walk away, her steps hurried and unsteady. Ckless watched her go, his mind made up. Whatever was going on, he would get to the bottom of it, even if it meant confronting the man everyone called Daddy Possibilities. Back at home, Colonel couldn't stop thinking about Fiyin. Her frightened expression and nervous demeanour confirmed his worst fears. There was more to Daddy Possibilities than met the eye. He felt a mix of anger and determination bubbling inside him. Tola noticed his distracted state during dinner and frowned. "Cunley, what's wrong with you? You've barely touched your food." "It's nothing," Colonel replied, forcing a smile. "Just tired from the service." Tola didn't press further, but Kuna knew he had to keep his investigation secret. If he told Tola, she would likely dismiss him again, or, worse, confront the pastor prematurely. Meanwhile, Fiyin sat on her bed, staring at Cunley's card. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, shame, and a flicker of hope. She wanted to call him, but doubt crept in. Could she really trust him? What if he told someone else? As the days passed, Fiyin found herself replaying their brief encounter in her mind. There was something genuine about Cunley's concern, something that made her believe he wasn't like the others. Cunley and Tunde sat at a corner table in the small cafe, their faces tense with anticipation. They had spent weeks carefully planning how to expose Daddy Possibilities, and today was the day they would finalize the details with Fiyin. Fiyin walked in, her face calm but distant, as she made her way to the table. Cunley noticed something different about her. Her usual nervousness seemed to have vanished, replaced by an unsettling sense of composure. "Fiyin, thank you for coming," Cunley said, motioning for her to sit. She smiled faintly, taking her seat. "You said it was urgent," she said. Cunley exchanged a quick glance with Tunde, then leaned forward. "Yes, we've been working on a plan to expose Daddy Possibilities. Tunde here is a private investigator, and he'll help us set everything up. We just need your cooperation." Bayin tilted her head, a confused expression on her face. "Expose him? Expose him for what?" Clooney froze, his heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" "You told me everything, Fiyin, about what he's been doing to you. We talked about this." Fiyin's face remained blank, her tone neutral. "I don't know what you're talking about." Tunde's eyebrows shot up in surprise, but he remained silent, observing the exchange. "Fiyin," Colonel said, his voice trembling, "you told me, you trusted me. Are you saying now that none of that happened?" Fiyin shrugged, avoiding his gaze. "I must have been mistaken. Daddy Possibilities is a man of God. He's done nothing wrong to me." Ckless's chest tightened. "Ckless, please," he pleaded. "If someone has threatened you, tell me. We can protect you." "I haven't been threatened," Fionn replied curtly. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ckless." Cwnlyn leaned back in his chair, stunned. He felt as though the ground had been pulled out from under him. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "Fionn, why are you saying this now, after everything you told me?" Fionn's expression remained unreadable. "I think you should stop this, Cwnless. Whatever you're planning, it's wrong to go against a man of God. You'll only bring trouble to yourself." Cwnless stared at her, his mind racing. What had changed? Why was she suddenly denying everything? Tunde, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "Fionn, I don't know what's going on, but if you've changed your mind, it's okay to be honest about it. You're safe here." "I'm being honest," Fionn said firmly. "There's nothing to change my mind about. I don't know what Cwnless is talking about." Cwnless's frustration boiled over. "Fionn, stop this. You don't have to lie for him. He's manipulating you." Fionn stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I'm not lying. I think it's best I leave now." Cwnless reached out to stop her, but Tunde grabbed his arm. "Let her go," Tunde said quietly. Fionn turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Cwnless staring after her in disbelief. Cwnless slumped back in his chair, his head in his hands. "I don't understand," he muttered. "She was ready to expose him. She trusted me. What happened?" Tunde sighed, his face thoughtful. "Something's not adding up. Either she's scared or she's been manipulated in some way." Cwnless looked up at him, his eyes filled with despair. "What do we do now? Without her testimony, we have nothing." "We regroup," Tunde said firmly. "This isn't over, Cwnless. If Daddy Possibilities is as dangerous as you say, we'll find another way to expose him. But we need to tread carefully. Clearly he's more cunning than we thought." Cwnless nodded slowly, though his heart felt heavy. He couldn't shake the image of Fionn's blank face and the way she had so casually denied everything. Meanwhile, Fionn sat in her room, staring at the mirror. Daddy Possibilities' words echoed in her mind. "You're special, Fionn. If I weren't married, I would have made you my wife. But I love you, and I'll always protect you." His praises and declarations of love had begun to fill the void she didn't know she had. At first, she had been scared and ashamed, but over time she started to crave the attention. No one had ever made her feel as special as Daddy Possibilities did. As much as she tried to push Cwnless's words out of her mind, a small voice lingered, questioning if she had made the right choice. But the pastor's influence was strong, and Fionn found herself clinging to the comfort he provided, no matter how twisted it was. She picked up her phone. Fionn stared at her phone as she hovered over Cwnless's number for the last time. With a deep sigh, she tapped delete and tossed her phone onto her bed. The weight of her decision settled over her like a heavy cloud, but she convinced herself it was for the best. Cwnless's probing questions and Tunde's constant reminders made her feel cornered. It was easier this way, she thought. Across town, Cwnless sat in his dimly lit living room, his phone resting in his palm. The frustration in his chest burned like a wildfire as his calls to Fionn went unanswered. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. "Dollar," he called out to his wife who was in the kitchen. "Yes," she responded, her voice distant. "I can't shake this feeling. Something's not right with Fionn. I need to speak with her." Tola walked into the living room, drying her hands with a towel. "Cwnless, you've been obsessing over this for weeks. If she doesn't want to talk, there's nothing you can do. You'll only drive yourself crazy. But what if she's in danger? What if Daddy Possibilities—" His voice trailed off. Tola sighed, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done all you can. If she's not ready to speak, then you need to let it go. Pray for her." Cwnless didn't respond. His gut told him something was terribly wrong, but for now, all he could do was hope she would reach out. In her room, Fee scrolled aimlessly through the internet until she stumbled upon an anonymous blog. The header read, "Confess your truth, no judgment, just advice." Curiously, she clicked on it and skimmed through the posts. People shared stories of heartbreak, career struggles, and family issues. Some posts were serious, others seemed trivial. Fee bit her lip as she contemplated what to write. The secrecy of it felt comforting. No one would know it was her. Finally, she typed out her post. "I'm a young woman who's been having an affair with a powerful pastor. It started with fear, but now, I don't know what I feel. Someone is trying to help me expose him, but I'm confused. Should I? Or should I just let things continue as they are?" Her finger hovered over the post button before she finally clicked it. Almost instantly, the comments began pouring in. One read, "Expose him. Men like that don't deserve to get away with this." Another said, "You should tell your family and friends and make this public. You'll save other girls from him." But the majority of the responses were different. "You're lucky. Enjoy it while it lasts. He must really like you if he's taking care of you. What's the problem? It's not a bad thing. Don't ruin your blessings." Fee's heart raced as she read the comments. The words, "enjoy it," stuck with her. She hadn't thought of it that way before. Maybe this wasn't as wrong as she'd been made to believe. If people thought it wasn't a big deal, maybe it wasn't. The following Sunday, Fee received another call from Daddy Possibilities. His tone was warm, almost playful, as he asked to see her after the evening prayer meeting. She agreed, but this time something in her was different. When she walked into his office that evening, she didn't avoid his gaze. Instead, she met his eyes with a steady expression. Daddy Possibilities noticed the shift in her demeanor immediately. "Fee, my dear," he began, stepping closer to her. "You seem more relaxed today." Fee nodded slightly, her hands clasped in front of her. "I've been thinking about a lot of things, Daddy. I think I understand now." His brows arched in surprise, but a pleased smile spread across his face. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. He pulled her closer to himself, wrapping his hand tightly around her waist. "I am a vessel of God, and if you obey me, you've obeyed God himself," Pastor Adatola, a.k.a. Daddy Possibilities, said to Fee. The church auditorium was packed to capacity, the air thick with the sounds of prayer, worship, and the rustling of offering envelopes. Daddy Possibilities stood at the pulpit, radiating authority and charisma as he wiped his brow with a white handkerchief. "This is the hour of revelation," he thundered into the microphone. "The Spirit of God is moving mightily in this place." The crowd erupted in a chorus of Amen and Hallelujah. Fee sat near the middle row, her hands clasped tightly on her lap. Her mind was elsewhere, clouded by confusion and inner conflict. She could barely focus on the fiery prayers or the pastor's dramatic declarations. Daddy Possibility's voice dropped to a lower, more deliberate tone, signaling that a prophecy was about to begin. "The Lord is revealing something urgent," he said, scanning the congregation. "There is a young woman here today, and the enemy is after your life." The congregation collectively held their breath, waiting for the revelation. Daddy Possibility's eyes landed on a richly dressed young lady seated in the front row. She wore a glittering gold gown, her designer bag perched elegantly on her lap. She certainly wasn't a wanderer. "You, my daughter," he said, pointing at her. "Please rise." The young lady stood, her face a mix of curiosity and fear. "The Lord has shown me something about you," Daddy Possibilities continued. "There is a group of friends around you, friends who pretend to love you, but they are plotting against you. One of them plans to poison your food. The Lord has revealed this to me because he wants to save you." The woman gasped, her hands flying to her chest. The congregation murmured in awe, some clapping and shouting praises. Daddy Possibilities continued with vivid details about the plot, naming locations and even describing one of the supposed friends. In the midst of the uproar, Fienne's gaze remained fixed on Daddy Possibilities. Her emotions churned inside her, a confusing cocktail of disbelief, doubt, and fear. Was this really the man of God her mother revered so much? Could someone so connected to the divine also be the man who had been preying on her? Her eyes flicked to Colonel, who sat a few rows behind her, his arms crossed and his face unreadable. She knew he had been keeping a watchful eye on her, though she had avoided him since their last conversation. The prophecy concluded with Daddy Possibilities declaring a special prayer for the young lady's protection. The congregation erupted into wild applause, shouting praises of Daddy Possibilities, the prophet of our time. After the service, Fietten's mother grabbed her arm. "Did you see how God is using Daddy Possibilities?" she exclaimed. "That prophecy was so detailed. Truly, he is a man of God." Bien forced a weak smile, nodding silently. She didn't trust her voice to hold steady enough for a reply. As the congregation filed out, Fienne felt a familiar sense of dread creep over her. She knew what was coming. True to form, Daddy Possibilities had sent her a subtle signal after the service, a fleeting glance that told her he wanted to see her. When her mother got caught up in a conversation with some churchwomen, Fienne used the opportunity to slip away toward Daddy Possibilities' office. Her heart pounded in her chest as she approached the familiar frosted glass door. She hesitated for a moment before knocking lightly. "Come in, my dear," his voice called from inside. Fienne stepped into the office, closing the door behind her. Daddy Possibilities was seated at his desk, his ever-present serene smile plastered on his face. "Ah, Fienta," he said warmly, gesturing for her to sit. "You look lovely today." Fienne lowered herself into the chair across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She didn't respond to his compliment, her eyes fixed on the edge of his desk. "You seemed quiet during the service," he observed, leaning forward slightly. "Is everything all right?" "Mind, sir," Fienne replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Daddy Possibilities nodded, his smile never wavering. Good. I hope you were blessed by the service today. Did you see how the Lord revealed the plans of the enemy?" Fienne nodded weakly. She didn't trust herself to say anything more. He stood up, moving around the desk to sit on the edge closest to her. Fienne stiffened as he reached out to touch her shoulder. "My dear, you've been such a blessing to this ministry," he said softly. "The Lord has great plans for you, and I'm here to guide you on that path." Fienne didn't respond, her mind racing as his hand slid from her shoulder to her arm, and went further to her lips as he pulled her closely. "You've become so special to me," he continued, his tone more intimate. "I see greatness in you, and I want to make sure you reach your full potential." Fienne stared at her lap, her throat dry and her pulse pounding in her ears. "I'll call you later tonight," he said, pulling her gently to her feet. "We'll meet in our usual spot." Fienne nodded automatically, her body moving on autopilot as he ushered her toward the door. "Be a good girl," he said. Fienne left the office feeling numb, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic mess. She didn't understand how a man who spoke with such conviction and authority about God could also behave this way. As she walked back to find her mother, she spotted Ckless standing near the church entrance, his eyes fixed on her. She quickly looked away, her guilt and shame bubbling to the surface. She didn't know how much longer she could keep pretending that everything was fine, but for now, she would continue to play along. The evening air was calm as Fienne prepared to leave the house. She stood in front of the mirror in her room, adjusting her blouse nervously. Her reflection stared back at her, a mixture of unease and resignation. She told herself that everything was fine. This was what Daddy Possibilities had asked for, and she couldn't disappoint him. She opened her door to find her mother sitting in the living room scrolling through her phone. Fienne swallowed hard and approached her cautiously. "Mummy, I'm heading to church," she said, forcing a smile. "Daddy Possibilities has called for a special prayer session." Her mother looked up, her expression brightening immediately. "Ah, wonderful. That man of God is truly a blessing." Make sure you focus and receive the anointing, my dear. Yes, Mummy, Fionn said, avoiding her mother's eyes. As Fionn stepped out of the house, her mother went back to her phone, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. She had just settled deeper into the couch when a knock sounded at the door. Who could that be? She muttered, standing up and heading to the door. When she opened it, she was surprised to see a young man standing there, neatly dressed in a crisp shirt and trousers. His face was serious but polite, his eyes carrying a weight of urgency. "Good evening, Ma'am," the man said, bowing slightly. "My name is Ckless. I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Good evening," Fionn's mother replied, her brows furrowing. "No, you're not disturbing me. Please, come in." Ckless stepped into the living room, taking a seat on the edge of the couch when she offered him one. "Can I get you some water?" she asked, still trying to place the young man in her mind. "No thank you, Ma. I won't take much of your time," Ckless said, his tone measured and deliberate. "So, what brings you here? Do I know you?" Ckless shook his head. "No, Ma. You don't know me personally, but I know your daughter Fionn." At the mention of Fionn's name, her mother's face softened, though her curiosity deepened. "Ooh, Fionn, is she in some kind of trouble?" Ckless hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Ma, I came here because I'm very concerned about something. It's about Fionn and daddy possibilities." Fionn's mother's eyes widened slightly, and she immediately sat up straighter. "What do you mean? What about daddy possibilities?" Colonel took a deep breath, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "Ma, please don't misunderstand me. I know Daddy Possibilities is someone you trust deeply. He's a man of God, and many people hold him in high regard. But I've noticed certain things that have made me very worried about his relationship with Fionn." Her mother's face hardened slightly, her loyalty to the pastor flaring up. "What exactly are you trying to say? Daddy Possibilities is a holy man. He has no reason to be involved in anything inappropriate." "I understand how this sounds, Ma," Ckless said quickly, "and I'm not asking you to believe me immediately, but I've been observing for some time now. Fionn has been acting differently, and I've noticed that she's been spending a lot of private time with Daddy Possibilities. Ma, I think something might be happening, something that isn't right." Her mother's expression wavered. She wanted to dismiss Ckless outright, to defend the pastor she had come to see as a spiritual leader and mentor, but the fact that it involved her daughter gave her pause. "You're accusing a man of God without proof," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you know what you're saying? This is a serious matter." Ckless nodded. "I know, Mum. That's why I didn't want to come here until I was sure. I wouldn't accuse him without reason. I care about Fionn, and I don't want her to get hurt. All I'm asking is that you look into it. Watch closely, talk to her if you can. If I'm wrong, then I'll apologize. What exactly do you think is happening?" she asked cautiously. Ckless hesitated for a moment, then said, "I think Daddy Possibilities is taking advantage of Fionn. I don't know how far it's gone, but from what I've seen, I'm almost certain he's manipulating her. She's young and vulnerable, and he's using his position as a pastor to get close to her." Her mother's hands trembled slightly as she processed his words. The thought of her beloved pastor doing something so vile was almost too much to bear. But she couldn't ignore the possibility, not when it came to her daughter. "Do you have any proof?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ckless shook his head. "Not yet, Ma. That's why I came to you. I need your help to confirm what's really happening. Fionn might not want to talk to me about it, but maybe she'll open up to you." Her mother sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. This is a lot to take in. I don't know what to think." Ckless reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card, handing it to her. "My, I understand how difficult this must be. I don't expect you to make any decisions right now, but please, keep an eye on Fionn. If you notice anything or if you need someone to talk to, call me. I just want to make sure she's safe." As Ckless left the house, Fiona's mother sat on the couch, staring at the card in her hand. Her mind was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, fear, and a gnawing sense of doubt. She wanted to trust Daddy Possibilities, but her instincts as a mother refused to let her dismiss Kunle's warning completely. She glanced at the clock, wondering where Fai-in was at that moment. A pang of unease settled in her chest, and for the first time she began to question the man she had placed so much faith in. It was late at night, and Fai-in's mother, Mrs. Adeola, lay on her bed, tossing and turning. Kunle's visit earlier in the day had planted a seed of doubt in her mind, one that was growing with every passing hour. She had spent years trusting Daddy Possibilities as her spiritual leader, but the thought that he might be involved in something inappropriate with her daughter gnawed at her. The more she tried to push the thought away, the stronger it came back. She couldn't shake the look in Kunle's eyes when he spoke about his suspicions, or the way Fai-in had seemed distant and uneasy lately. Finally, unable to take it anymore, she got out of bed and began pacing the room. She needed answers, but how could she get them without confronting Fai-in directly? Then an idea struck her. She could check Fai-in's phone. Surely there would be some clues there. She hesitated at first. Going through her daughter's phone felt like a betrayal of trust, but this was bigger than trust. It was about her daughter's safety. Her resolve hardened, and she made up her mind. "Fai-in," she called out, standing at the door of her room. "Yes, Mummy," Fai-in responded from her own room. "Please, come here. My phone is acting up and I need to browse something quickly. Let me use your phone." Fai-in appeared at the door a moment later, holding her phone. She handed it over without hesitation. "Here you go, Mummy. I'll be in my room if you need anything." "Thank you, my dear," her mother said, trying to keep her tone casual. The moment Fai-in left, Mrs. Adeola sat down and unlocked the phone. She navigated to the WhatsApp app and began scrolling through Fai-in's contacts. Her heart raced as she skimmed the list of saved numbers. Then she saw it. A contact saved as Daddy Possibilities. The love emoji at the end of the name made her sit up straighter. Her instinct screamed that something was wrong. She clicked on the contact, but to her dismay, the conversation was empty. The chat history had been deleted. Mrs. Adeola frowned, her suspicion deepening. Why would Fai-in delete her messages with the pastor? Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the contact. The doubt in her mind was now overshadowed by alarm. She needed to know more. Taking a deep breath, she decided to call the number. She pressed the call button, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. The phone rang for a few seconds before a voice answered. "Hello, baby," a deep, familiar voice said warmly from the other end. Mrs. Adeola's breath caught in her throat. It was unmistakably Daddy Possibilities. She stared at the phone in shock, unable to speak. The casual intimacy in his voice confirmed her worst fears. Quickly, she ended the call and deleted the call history, her hands moving frantically. She placed the phone on the table and stared into space, her mind racing. It was true. Kunle had been right all along. The pastor she had trusted with her family, the man she revered as a spiritual father, was calling her daughter baby. A wave of emotions crashed over her. Anger, disbelief, shame, and guilt. How had she not seen this coming? How had she missed the signs? She had pushed Fai-in to trust and obey this man, and now she realized she might have been sending her daughter into harm's way. For a few minutes, she sat frozen, staring at the phone. Then, her anger began to boil. She wanted to storm into Fai-in's room and confront her. She wanted to march to the church and expose Daddy Possibilities for the fraud he was. But she stopped herself. Kunle's words echoed in her mind. "Tread with caution. Don't alert Fai-in or anyone else just yet. We need to be careful." She took a deep breath and tried to calm herself. Acting impulsively would only make things worse. She needed to think carefully about her next move. She picked up the phone again and scrolled through Fai-in's other contacts and messages. But apart from the suspicious contact with Daddy Possibilities, everything else seemed normal. Satisfied that she had gathered enough for now, she locked the phone and called out to Fai-in. "Fai-in, come and take your phone," she said, her voice steady. Fai-in entered the room, her expression calm and unsuspecting. "Did you find what you were looking for, Mummy?" "Yes, I did, thank you." her mother replied, handing the phone back. "All right, good night," Fionn said, heading back to her room. "Good night, my dear," her mother responded, watching her leave. Once Fionn was gone, Mrs. Adiola sat on her bed, her mind working furiously. She couldn't go to sleep now. She needed to figure out what to do next. Should she confront Fionn? Should she call Cunley and tell him what she had found? Or should she take this information directly to the church elders? She decided to start with Cunley. He had been the one to warn her, and he seemed to know more about the situation. She picked up her own phone and dialed his number. "Hello, Ma," Cunley answered, his voice cautious. "Cunley," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You were right. I just checked Fionn's phone and there's something very wrong. She has Daddy Possibility's number saved with a love emoji, and when I called the number, he called her baby." Mrs. Adiola nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "You're right. But what do we do now? Let's meet tomorrow, Ma. I'll come to your house and we can discuss a plan. Please try to stay calm. We'll handle this." After ending the call, Mrs. Adiola sat back and sighed deeply. She felt a small sense of relief, knowing she wasn't facing this alone. But as she lay down to try and rest, her mind kept replaying the voice on the phone, and the realization that she had trusted a man who had betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. The next morning, the cafe was quiet and serene, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in Mrs. Adiola's mind. Cunley was already seated when she arrived, his face a mask of determination. "Good morning, Ma," he greeted, rising to pull out a chair for her. "Good morning, Cunley," she replied, sitting down and clasping her hands tightly. "Thank you for meeting me." Cunley nodded. "Ma, we have to handle this wisely. If Daddy Possibilities finds out we're onto him, he could become more dangerous." "I agree," Mrs. Adiola said, her voice firm. "What do we do next?" Cunley leaned forward. "We need Fionn to open up about everything. If she can tell you the full truth, it will be easier for us to gather evidence. Once we have solid proof, we can report him to the authorities." Mrs. Adiola sighed heavily. "I'm afraid she won't talk to me. She might be too scared or ashamed to admit what's been happening. That's why you'll need to use her trust in you as her mother," Cunley said gently. "Don't accuse her. Just let her know you're on her side." They continued discussing the details, and by the time they parted ways, they had a plan. Cunley would reach out to Tunde, a mutual friend with a knack for technology, to help gather any additional evidence, while Mrs. Adiola would focus on getting Fionn to confess. That evening, as the sun set and the house grew quiet, Mrs. Adiola sat in her room, rehearsing what she would say to Fionn. She decided to lean on a classic African mother strategy, invoking the power of dreams. "Fionn," she called, her voice firm but calm. Fionn appeared in the doorway moments later. "Yes, Mummy? Come in," her mother said, patting the edge of the bed. "Sit down. I need to talk to you." Fionn hesitated, sensing the serious tone in her mother's voice. Slowly, she sat down. "Bien," her mother began, her face etched with concern. "I had a dream last night. A troubling dream. In this dream, I saw you struggling, carrying a heavy burden, but you wouldn't let me help you. I woke up with such a heavy heart." Fionn's eyes widened slightly, and she shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah," her mother continued, taking Fionn's hand in hers. "I don't know what this burden is, but as your mother, I can feel that something is not right. If there's anything you're hiding, anything at all, please tell me. I promise I won't judge you. I just want to help." Fionn's lower lip trembled, and tears began to pool in her eyes. "Mummy," she started, her voice breaking. "Go on, my child," her mother urged, squeezing her hand. "I'm so sorry, Mummy," Fionn sobbed, the floodgates finally opening. "I've been so scared to tell you, but it's Daddy Possibilities. He's been doing things to me, things I didn't want. At first I resisted, but he said if I told anyone our family would be cursed. I didn't know what to do." As Fionn poured out her heart, detailing everything that had happened. The prayers, the threats, the meetings in hotels. Her mother's heart shattered. Tears streamed down her face as she pulled her daughter into a tight embrace. "My baby," she wept, rocking Fien gently. "I am so sorry. I should have protected you. I should have seen the signs. Please forgive me." Fien clung to her mother, sobbing into her shoulder. "I didn't know who to turn to, Mummy. I was so scared." "You've done the right thing by telling me," her mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We will fix this. I promise you, we will make this right." The following day, with Tunde's help, they began gathering evidence. Tunde was a tech-savvy young man who understood how to retrieve deleted messages and record conversations discreetly. He managed to recover a few incriminating messages from Fien's phone and devised a plan to capture more evidence in real time. They decided to set up a meeting between Fien and Daddy Possibilities, during which Tunde would discreetly record their conversation. Fien was reluctant at first, but with her mother's encouragement, she agreed. The plan worked. Tunde captured audio of Daddy Possibilities making inappropriate comments and discussing their secret meetings. With this damning evidence in hand, they took their case to the police. It was a Sunday morning and the church was packed for the weekly service. Daddy Possibility stood at the pulpit, preaching with his usual charisma, oblivious to what was about to happen. Halfway through the sermon, a group of police officers entered the church, their presence causing a stir among the congregation. "Daddy Possibilities," one of the officers called out, stepping forward. "You are under arrest for sexual assault and abuse of authority." The church erupted in gasps and murmurs as the officers approached the pulpit. Daddy Possibilities attempted to maintain his composure, raising his hands in mock innocence. "This is a mistake," he exclaimed. "I am a man of God. Who dares to accuse me?" At that moment, Mrs. Rauchel, the mother of the late Deborah, stepped forward from the congregation. Her face was a mask of grief and determination as she held up a notebook. "This," she said, her voice shaking, "is my daughter Deborah's journal. Before she took her own life, she wrote about how you manipulated and violated her. You destroyed my daughter." The congregation fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. The officers didn't hesitate. They handcuffed Daddy Possibilities and led him out of the church as the stunned congregation looked on. In the weeks that followed, Daddy Possibilities was tried and sentenced to prison. His downfall sent shockwaves through the community. Daddy Possibilities' wife began having terrifying nightmares. Every night, she saw Deborah standing before her, eyes hollow and filled with pain. Deborah's voice echoed in her ears, asking, "Why did you let him do this to me? Why did you stay silent?" The dreams tormented her until she could bear it no more. One Sunday morning, she stood before the entire congregation, trembling. With tears streaming down her face, she confessed everything. How she had known her husband's evil deeds but kept quiet to protect her home and reputation. "I was wrong," she sobbed. "I let my fear and selfishness keep me silent while innocent girls suffered." Gasps filled the church. Parents of the victims were outraged. Mothers wept. Fathers clenched their fists in fury. No one was willing to forgive. They had trusted her, yet she had allowed their daughters to be harmed. One by one, the congregation walked out, leaving her alone. As reality sank in, she collapsed to the ground, wailing in regret, prompting many parents to have open conversations with their children about abuse and the importance of speaking out. For Phelan and her mother, the road to healing was long, but they faced it together, stronger than ever. And though the scars of the past could never be erased, they found solace in knowing that justice had been served. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe for more.